And then Bombers and Rough Riders in must-win games. I think both. I mean, the Alouettes won't be playing their starters as well, and the Stampeders will be probably playing their starters, but it won't matter because the starters aren't very good anyways. All right, welcome back, CFL fans. It's the moment you've all been waiting for. Solo podcast from yours truly. I am your host, Cody, and this is the Out of Bounds Sports Podcast. We've got CFL Week 20 to talk about today. Second last week in the regular season. We had a couple meaningless games, one game with playoff implications, and then one game with a team just trying to get their footing while they head into the playoffs. So 3 games this week. We had Calgary at Hamilton, Ottawa at Toronto, and Montreal went out to the West Coast to visit the BC Lions, the struggling BC Lions. But after this week, don't know if we can say that. It was a pretty good, exciting week. Huge comeback in the Ottawa game, blowout in the Montreal game, and Bo finally got his first win against a team where he started it all, Calgary Stampeders. So we'll start with that game. Calgary did travel into Tim Hortons Field, and in a meaningless game, seems like a meaningless game, Hamilton, or Bo Levi Mitchell specifically, seemed to have found some meaning, because he was looking to win this game, like I said earlier, first win against his former team, the team where he had very much a lot of success, and that was pretty much the biggest storyline going into this game. I mean, both teams have been knocked out of the playoffs. Both teams will be looking to rebuild for next year. Calgary had a absolutely horrific season. 7 winless games going into this one. That includes the tie that they had with Montreal. And they just haven't been able to win. And they started their backup again, Schultz in there. And we had the lights set for Friday Night Football, and we did not know that Bo Levi Mitchell would come out, throw for over 450 yards, 5 passing touchdowns. These stats put him over the season, over 5,000 yards, and I mean, he would be in the running for MOP had Hamilton found a little bit more success. I mean, they're last place in the East, understandably, and I mean, but like he had over 1,000 yards more passing than the next quarterback, over 30 touchdowns. I mean, he put up MOP stats, but for some reason Hamilton couldn't find the win. They did find the win, however, this one. They went up 30-0 in the first half. 4 passing touchdowns for Bo in the first half. The game ended up 42-20. Calgary had a couple late garbage touchdowns. Dunbar Jr. and White both had 2 touchdowns to their name. And this was just a dominating win for Hamilton. And, I mean, I have a friend that works down at Tim Hortons Field. Said this is one of the busiest nights they've had all season. Going into the game, not really sure what to look for, but I mean, they were trying to get their money's worth. And from what she told me, the Hamilton fans, they had a good time that night. And I don't know what we'll have to do a little deep dive into their offseason, see kind of what areas they're going to need to improve on. Do they move on from that big contract with Bo? It's tough to tell. When you put up stats like that, but you're not winning, it's kind of contradictory, and it's hard to really gauge, where you're going to be at next year. But I think this was the third season in a row that Hamilton finished 8-10. And I mean, they did have a chance late in the season for that historic crossover into the East or into the West. But with the outing that they had against the Bombers a couple weeks ago, the game that we were at, they fell flat, and those hopes were crushed. So, like we said, going into this game, I think both teams played their whole starters. Schultz did take a pretty hard hit in the third quarter. Mayer did enter the game, but I believe Schultz did come back. And but at the end of the day, didn't really matter. Just Hamilton had this win locked up. So 42-20. And I mean, the dominating passing game in the first quarter pretty much sealed it the rest of the night. So Friday Night Football, and that'll be that. So Calgary will play Saskatchewan next game. They're going to have a tough game because Saskatchewan next week is going to want to lock up that first place in the West, and in order to do that, they have to win this game. So expect a tough matchup for Calgary, where Hamilton goes to Ottawa. And, I mean, although Ottawa now, after their loss this week, is locked into third place in the East, this is still an important game for them because they're on a 6-game losing streak. They do not, or a 5-game losing streak. They do not want to enter the playoffs and play the Argos again in 2 weeks on a 6-game losing streak. It's just, you need momentum, especially come playoff time. And although they did have a very valiant comeback, I don't think they ever thought they were going to win that game. So, and Hamilton, from from the head coach's point of view, he's saying, we're going to play for the momentum of next year. So they're not going to be resting players. They're going to throw their starters in there. Hamilton's going to have a fight. It's an East matchup as well. Like, these guys, they're somewhat of rivals, and Hamilton's going to want to spoil Ottawa's party. So Hamilton against Ottawa next week and Calgary against Saskatchewan. That'll wrap up the season for both those two teams, and as they both look ahead to next year and potential for what they're going to do. So we'll move on to the next game, and that was the biggest game of the week heading into it storyline-wise, because we had the number 2 at the time, Ottawa Redblacks, against the number 3 at the time, Toronto Argonauts. And going into this game, this was the game to wrap up, lock in second place in the East. Montreal locked up first place quite a while ago, and they'll have the first round bye. So this is pretty much who's going to host the playoff game in the East. Is it going to be Toronto at BMO Field, or is it going to be the nation's capital in Ottawa? And when you going into this, Chad Kelly, I mean, the Toronto Argonauts absolutely came into this game gunslinging. Kelly had the first 3 quarters of this game, it was a no-brainer. I mean, Toronto went up 38-6. Blown coverages all over the field for Ottawa. Toronto was just snap and throw. Snap and throw. There wasn't much to do. Ottawa didn't have a chance. And they set a huge hole for themselves. And even though Drew Brown did return after missing a month with injury, the slumpy start caused a comeback to be made that, unfortunately, or didn't get made, but it was close. Ottawa did come close to win this game after 2 onside kicks. I was looking at some stats. 0.27% chance is the chance that team's going to recover 2 onside kicks in a game back to back. And they're saying, like, if a team did 2 onside kicks every game for 20 years, it would only happen once. So absolutely historic by Lewis Ward with those 2 onside kicks. That did bring them back. The fourth quarter was 25-0 for Ottawa, but when you're down 38-6, you need a little bit more than that. And unfortunately, time just wasn't on their side. Although they did have one final play, they got the ball back with a minute left, tie the game, or less than a minute left, to tie the game. Run through the plays, last play of the game, dump it off, lateral. Thought they might make some headway, eventually got tackled, and Toronto recovered the ball. So, like I said, going into this game, 38-31, number 2 seed was on the line, and Ottawa, after being on a 4-game winless streak, they didn't look good. They dug themselves a hole that they were not able to get out of. There's a couple special teams errors. Another fumble return by Janarian Grant. This guy's been on fire all year with some of the most insane fumble returns. He looks like Devin Hester of 2005, 2006. But back-to-back games with fumble recoveries, they're going to want him to hold on to the ball, especially going into the playoffs. You can't have that. You can't have these special teams mistakes. And I mean, like, if you're talking special teams, we'll go to the other side of the ball. And like I mentioned, 2 onside kick recoveries. I don't think I've ever seen that in all my time watching football. I don't think I've ever seen it. You've seen times where, all right, like you're at the end of the game, you need those 2 onside kicks. You almost need the touchdown, 2-point, touchdown, 2-point, onside, touchdown, 2-point, onside. And it's just like, you hope it's going to happen, but like I said, 0.27% chance of that happening. And they almost got the third one too, which is absolutely unbelievable. So Drew Brown came back, like I said, after a month off, 72% completion, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns and interceptions, 252 of those yards, and 3 of the touchdowns came in the fourth quarter. So, the rookie Martiner had another touchdown. Pimpleton was their star receiver this game, 45 yards after the catch, and over 100 yards receiving. So, had Ottawa started a little bit stronger at the front end, this game might have been closer. This could have come. It came down to the wire, but if you look at the score and you look at the game, it was a tale of 4 quarters. 3 of them, Toronto showed up, and 1 of them, Ottawa showed up, and time just wasn't on their side. So, 20,487 fans packed the stadium. This is their second largest crowd at BMO Field. I think when we went earlier this year, it was around the 12,000 to 13,000 mark. They even opened the upper deck, which they haven't done since COVID, besides playoff games. So, lots of fans there for this game, which is exciting because now they're going to host a playoff game. And I mean, last year they hosted the East Final. I think they had 26,000 people there. So they host a playoff game. We could see another packed house at BMO Field, and when those fans get riled up, it's going to be tough to win. And we'll see what happens. But so Ottawa does play Hamilton. They host Hamilton at home. And Toronto will travel out to Edmonton. So I imagine Toronto's going to sit some of their starters or rest some of them starters at least for part of the game. Like I said, they've got the second place wrapped up. It's a long road trip all the way out to Edmonton. And they'll be looking to come back to Toronto in 2 weeks to host that Ottawa team. And Ottawa stays at home. They'll host Hamilton, who, like I mentioned earlier, probably looking to spoil the party and set up a long losing streak going in the playoffs. Ottawa's been an up and down team this year. Weird start. They had a strong middle, and then the back end, they just absolutely fallen apart. And blame it on quarterback injury, blame it on coaching. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see. And they had that second place pretty well locked up, and they fumbled it in the last couple weeks. So disappointing for Ottawa. But exciting stuff for Toronto. They're going to look to tie up a couple loose ends, rest a couple players next week, and then come back and host BMO Field. I might even look into tickets for that game because that would be a fun time. CFL playoff game. Never been to one of those. So me and Don can cap off our season with maybe a little Toronto win there heading into Montreal. So we'll go to our final game of the week. And that was the Montreal Alouettes visiting the BC Lions. Apparently there was historic torrential downpours going on in BC. But you wouldn't have known it because they have a domed stadium out there. Obviously, probably because of the rain. It makes sense to keep them domed. But the biggest headline going into this game, quarterback switch for the BC Lions. Nathan Rourke benched. Vernon Adams Jr. stepped in, and gotta say, I mean, you do have to note that Montreal did not play all their starters, and they've already had the number 1 seed wrapped up. So this game did not mean much for them, but VA definitely breathed some new life into this BC Lions offense, and they picked up pretty much right where they had last in week 6 when he got hurt. So their receiving core looked good. McInnes had a great game. Their defense played well. Vernon Adams, 385 passing yards, 3 total touchdowns, 2 in the air and 1 on the ground. And this was BC's final game. They're the odd men out next week, so they ended their season a bit earlier. So they'll have a week to regroup before they head to either Saskatchewan or Winnipeg for the first playoff game. But this was a must-win for BC in my eyes because BC, they've been struggling. Their quarterback play has been awful, and they paid Rourke so much, so you got to roll with him. It's kind of similar to what was going on with Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. It's like you give all this guaranteed money, they take up so much of your salary roll, and they don't perform. And what do? I mean, you can't have all that money sitting on the bench. You kind of got to roll with it. But eventually, I mean, I got to a certain point where their backup quarterback VA is a great guy, is a great quarterback. He played well going at the start of the season. I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the season, I thought BC was one of the teams to look out for, one of the dark horses of the season. They have, they have a strong offensive game, strong defensive game. Vernon Adams was their starting quarterback going into the season. Had high hopes for them, and they've had an up and down season as well. But it's kind of starting when VA got hurt. They were dominating the first couple weeks. So 52-yard touchdown pass for VA in the first quarter. Probably shook out some of the nerves for them. And from there, they just dominated. 27-3. I mean, they held the Montreal Alouettes to just 3 points all game. And, I mean, goal line stands all across the board. So, happy for VA. And while we're talking about VA, I'm going to say, I finally picked my first OOBSP Player of the Week for CFL Week 21, and I'm going to give that honor, to Vernon Adams Jr. Like I said, 385 passing yards, 3 total touchdowns, 26 for 36, and just gave this offense some new life. And some of the post-game interviews, players from the BC Lions, they were happy for him. This is VA's team. We're rolling with him. So I'm curious to see. They're going to take a week off. They'll find out next week who they're going to play in the first playoff game. Do you start Rourke or do you start Vernon Adams Jr.? And I want you guys to let us know in the comments. Who would you start for the playoff game against either Saskatchewan or Blue Bombers? Are you starting with Vernon Adams Jr.? Or are you going to roll with Nathan Rourke? Both great quarterbacks, or potentially great quarterbacks, but it's a tough one. I'm going to go Vernon Adams Jr. I think from the start of the season, he did the training camp with the team. He knows them well. I think he has better rapport with the team. I know Nathan Rourke used to play for the Lions, but I think the camaraderie was there. I think he motivates them. He's a great leader on the field, and he makes everyone play harder. So, Vernon Adams Jr., I'm picking you for the Player of the Week. I'm picking you for starting quarterback for the first playoff, first West playoff game. That's all there is to it. So that wraps up the game. I mean, 3 games this week. 3 good games. I mean, I was happy for Hamilton after such a crappy season for them. They're ending off on a high. Bo has a chance to throw for even more, like keep continuing past that 5,000 yard mark. I don't think he can really pad any MOP numbers, just because, I mean, it's one of the worst records in the league. And although passing yards, touchdowns are high, he did have a lot of interceptions, turnovers, and just wasn't able to lead the team to wins when they needed them. So Montreal and BC, big game for BC, big win for BC as they close out their season and look ahead to the playoffs now. And then a big win for Toronto as well. Like we said, wrapped up the second seed in the East, and now they can kind of take a breather before heading back to Toronto to face Ottawa again in 2 weeks. So that wraps up week 21 or week 20. We'll look ahead to week 21. We got a 4-game slate. Friday night doubleheader and a Saturday doubleheader. Hamilton will travel to Ottawa. Toronto will travel to Edmonton. That's your Friday night games. And then the two big ones, the two big games. Saturday, we got the Winnipeg Bombers heading over to Montreal in a must-win game to wrap up the West. And we got the Calgary Stampeders hosting the Saskatchewan Roughriders in a big game where they can also wrap up the West. So I believe that a Winnipeg win clinches it no matter what. But a Winnipeg loss and a Saskatchewan win would move Saskatchewan up to first. And if they both lose, then Winnipeg will sit in first. So Saskatchewan's going to be keeping their eye on the Winnipeg game just to see, their Saskatchewan's fate's not quite in their hands, but they're still going to have to win the game regardless. So 4 games. We'll go ahead to our picks this week. And one split. Don has the Redblacks, the Toronto Argonauts, the Bombers, and the Roughriders. And I picked the Hamilton Tiger Cats, Argonauts, Bombers, and Roughriders. I think Hamilton has nothing to lose. They're going to play. As you can see from last week, and with the coach stating that he is going to be playing some of their starters, I think they're going to go out and go out for a shootout. And Ottawa wants to win this game to end that losing streak. They want a little bit of momentum going to the playoffs. So I think that'll be a good game. Argonauts over the Elks. I guess it's really a nothing. This is the most meaningless game. I don't know who the Elks are going to start. I don't know what they're going to do. Toronto's definitely not going to have their starters in, but I still think they're the better team than the Elks. The Elks have just been had high hopes for them all season, and they haven't been able to pull through. And then Bombers and Roughriders in must-win games. I think both. The Alouettes won't be playing their starters as well, and the Stampeders will be probably playing their starters, but it won't matter because the starters aren't very good anyways. So there you have it. There's our picks for next week. We got the power rankings as well, which not much change here. I kept my power rankings all the same, and Don kept them all the same as well. Just made a minor change. He moved Hamilton down and Ottawa up. So Hamilton falls down back into bottom 3, and Ottawa moves up to 4th last there in the power rankings. Bombers, Alouettes, Argos, Roughriders, Lions. Those are your top 5. Put them in whatever order you want. But those are your playoff games. And you got Ottawa, who I think suits better in the bottom of the pack than the top of the pack. But regardless, 3 teams make the playoffs, and Ottawa's going to make it. So there we have it. For exciting final week. The Bombers play at 3 and the Roughriders play at 7 on Saturday. So, actually, that's interesting. I just realized that. So, Saskatchewan will know going into the game. If Winnipeg wins, Saskatchewan doesn't have a chance. So, interesting. I know in the NFL, they sometimes play these final games at the end of the year or at the same time, just because then you don't have outcomes being spilled, or you don't know the other team doesn't know what happened, or can't gauge it. But they obviously didn't do this here. So Winnipeg has a chance to just wrap up the West straight out. Saskatchewan's still going to be hosting a playoff game, so it's not the ultimate loss if the Bombers do end up wrapping up the West, but they're still going to want to take that first round bye. It's always great to take a first round bye. So I can't believe we're finally at the final week of the season. And it should be an exciting one. And then we go on to the playoffs November 2nd. 2 games. We still don't know who's... Well, I guess the one we do know, Toronto and Ottawa, but it doesn't... There's a 3 o'clock and a 6:30, so I imagine they're going to wait to the West to find out who's playing where. And then the following week, we have the playoff finals. And then we go on 2 weeks later with the Grey Cup on the 17th. So Or I guess it's only a week later. They don't take the bye week like they do in the NFL. So the 111th Grey Cup will be played Sunday, November 17th. You can follow all the action here. We'll be doing podcasts every week all the way up into the Grey Cup. And you can catch it there. Like I said, we might try to get to the Toronto game. Tickets aren't too crazy. I think that'd be a fun experience. But yeah, I think that's it for today, guys. Solo podcast. Tell me how I did. Do you like solo Cody, or do you need the tandem, the duo? We'll have Don back next week, so don't you worry for all you Don fans. But that's it. Smash that like button, guys, and hit the subscribe. We're almost at 250 subscribers. Can't believe it. It's been about 6 months, and we've loved doing this. CFL has been one of our favorite podcasts. We are Canadian. We're based out of Toronto, and so Don's been a CFL fan for his whole life. I've gotten into it recently, and it's exciting stuff. Exciting games. I mean, I saw something I've never seen before in football with the 2 onside kicks in the Ottawa game. So definitely some good football. I did want to note, actually, I was reading about the Ottawa game. This will actually be Ottawa's first road playoff game in their franchise history. They've had 7 playoff games in 10 years. 4 of them were home games, and they lost one of those, and 3 of them were Grey Cup games. And Grey Cup games don't count as road games. So this will be Ottawa's first road playoff game, and we'll see what they can do. Honorable mentions for the player of the week. We have Bo Levi Mitchell and Drew Brown. Both big games, but they came up short, so I had to roll with Ferdinand Adams Jr. I think that's everything for today. Subscribe, like, comment what you think, and we'll see you next week. Final week, or we'll wrap up the final week. We'll look ahead to the playoffs, and we'll keep rolling from there. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you next week.